Have you ever noticed that the biggest shift in your career rarely happens on your own? They usually come from a conversation, a comment you left on someone's post, a message that turned into a meeting, or a connection that quietly opened a door you did not even realize was there. Welcome back to I'm No Ricky. I'm really glad that you're here today because this is a conversation I think a lot of people need, especially if you're building confidence around stepping into an education or training role. Today, we're talking about how to use LinkedIn to connect with educators and thought leaders in the industry without feeling awkward, salesy, or like you're forcing yourself into spaces you don't belong. If there's one thing I want you to hear early on, it's this: you do not grow alone. Community builds confidence and it creates opportunities you often can't plan for. So I want to talk to you about my own experience with LinkedIn and making connections. When I first started connecting with others, especially other educators, awarding bodies, and industry professionals, I wasn't trying to build a personal brand or grow an audience. I was simply curious. I followed people whose work I respected and paid attention to how educators spoke about teaching, assessment, and learners. I commented when something genuinely resonated with me. Over time, those small interactions turned into conversations. Those conversations led to collaborations, and those collaborations opened doors I never would have seen coming, including audits, guest talks, shared projects, and professional insights that you just don't get from a qualification alone. None of that came from cold pitching or asking for favors. It came from showing up consistently and contributing in a way that felt natural to me. One of the easiest places to begin is simply by being intentional about who you follow. If you're thinking about education, start following awarding bodies and examination organizations, professional associations, training providers and colleges, educators, lecturers, assessors, internal quality assurers, industry leaders who talk about learning, teaching, and assessment. When you do this, your feed starts to change. You begin to see how educators think, what they care about, and what conversations are happening right now in the sector. That comfort of space matters. Education starts feeling like a closed world and starts to feel like a space you can step into with confidence. Something to think about here. If your feed only reflects where you've been, it becomes harder to picture where you're going to next. This is where most people hold themselves back. They read posts, they like them quietly, then they scroll on. Commenting is where connections actually start. You don't need to say something clever or write a long response. You just need to be genuine and relevant. That might sound like this really reflects what I'm learning at the moment, or I hadn't thought about it from this angle before. Thank you for sharing. Another could be this matches what I'm seeing with learners right now. Thoughtfully, you become visible, not just to the person who posted, but to everyone else reading that conversation. Over time, people start to recognize your name. They associate you with education, learning, and professional discussion. And that's how relationships begin naturally. So let's also talk about connection requests on LinkedIn because this is another area where people overthink things. You don't need a long explanation. You don't need to sell yourself. And you definitely don't need to ask for anything straight away. That's a big no-no. A short message works best. For example, I've been following your post on education and assessment, and I really appreciate your insights. I'm currently developing my own pathway into education. I would love to connect. That's it. It shows respect, relevance, and intention without pressure. Most people are far more open to connecting when it feels human rather than transactional. Here's something many aspiring educators underestimate. You don't need to wait until you're fully qualified or in a formal teaching role to be visible. Sharing your learning journey matters. And that's something that I want to do very much this year. So that might be a reflection on a course you're studying, something you've learned from an assignment, or an insight from observing a session. These posts aren't about proving anything, they're about showing engagement and growth. I've seen people gain confidence simply because others encourage them in the comments. I've also seen educators quietly notice those who consistently show up with thoughtful reflections. You just never know who's watching. Before we go any further, I want to briefly acknowledge Developing Educators Academy for supporting this podcast. Developing Educators Academy supports professionals as they move into education through the Level 3 award and the Level 4 certificate education and training alongside the Level 3 assessor's qualification, which is central to the work that we do. These qualifications don't just give you a certificate, they give you language, structure, and confidence to step into educator roles with clarity. If you're exploring what your next step could look like, understanding the right qualification for you can be a really good grounding place to start. If you're interested in learning more, visit developingeducatorsacademy.com/sibtac. One of the biggest shifts I see when people start connecting with other educators is what happens to their confidence. They start feeling like they're on the outside looking in. They stop questioning whether they belong. They realize others have the same doubts, pauses, and learning curves. Education can feel intimidating when you view it from a distance. Community changes that. When you engage with people already doing the work, it becomes clearer that there is a space for everyone. I want to leave you with this. LinkedIn isn't about self-promotion. It's about connection and contribution. When you show up with curiosity, consistency, and a willingness to engage, you build relationships that support your growth in ways you can't always predict. You don't need to be loud, you just need to be present. If this episode resonated with you, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. It helps more people find these conversations and feel supported as they take their next steps. And if you know someone who's quietly thinking about moving into education, share this episode with them. Sometimes knowing you don't have to do it alone is exactly what's needed. Remember, you are no rookie in the game of life. See you in the next episode.